Ethan Cole, 41 years. I ruined my marriage in a moment that lasted less than 10 minutes. And the worst part is, I knew it mattered, even while it was happening. I wish I could tell you it was a mistake. Something impulsive. Something I didn't see coming. But the truth is, I saw it. I just didn't stop. If you had looked at my life before that night, you would have said I had everything figured out. A wife I loved. A house we built together. A life that made sense. Simple. Stable. My wife, Lauren, and I had been married for 13 years. Together for almost 17. We met young. Built everything slowly. Nothing rushed. Nothing careless. We had history. The kind that becomes part of your identity. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. That word again. Solid. No drama. No constant fighting. No instability. Just a quiet, steady kind of love. The kind people trust. The kind people assume will last. We had routines. Morning coffee together. Short conversations before work. Evenings that looked like dinner, TV, sleep. Weekends that felt predictable in the best way. Comfortable. Familiar. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. That love didn't need to feel intense all the time. That stability meant success. That if nothing was breaking, everything was fine. But that's not the whole truth. Because sometimes, nothing breaks. It just slowly changes. And you don't notice it until it's too late. Lauren started becoming quieter. Not distant. Not cold. Just less present. She still showed up. Still cared. Still did everything she always did. But something in her energy shifted. Subtle. Almost invisible. The kind of change you can ignore if you want to. And I did. At first. Because it was easier than asking questions. Easier than risking an answer I might not want to hear. Everything okay? I asked her one night. We were sitting on the couch. TV on. The usual routine. Yeah, she said. Just tired. I nodded. Accepted it. Moved on. That's how it happens. You ask. You get a simple answer. And you choose to believe it. Not because it's true. Because it's easier. Over time, those small moments started adding up. Conversations got shorter. Silences got longer. We still talked. But not deeply. Not honestly. Not in a way that made you feel connected. And instead of addressing it, I adapted. That's what people do. You adjust to the distance. You normalize it. You convince yourself it's just part of long-term relationships. That this is what happens. That love becomes quieter. Less expressive. More functional. That's what I told myself. And for a while, it worked. Until something shifted inside me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just slowly. I started noticing the silence more. Feeling it. Not just around me. Inside me. And that's when the tension began. Because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know how to fully explain it. I just knew something felt off. And instead of facing it, I looked for something else. Something easier. Something that didn't require effort. Or honesty. Or vulnerability. That's how it starts. Not with betrayal. With avoidance. With looking away from something real. And turning toward something that feels simpler. That's when she appeared. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just naturally. Her name was Rachel. She worked in the same building. Different company. Someone I had seen before. Passed in the hallway. Nodded to. Nothing more. Until one day, we ended up in the same elevator. Small talk. Nothing important. But something about it felt easy. Effortless. And that's what caught my attention. Because it was the opposite of what I had been feeling at home. No tension. No silence. No expectation. Just conversation. And for the first time in a while, I felt seen. Not deeply. Not meaningfully. Just noticed. And that was enough. At first, we started running into each other more often. Coffee in the lobby. Short conversations. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing obvious. Just connection. The kind that feels harmless. Until it's not. Because the danger isn't in what happens at the beginning. It's in how easy it feels. How natural. How justified. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that it was just conversation, just a distraction, just something to break the monotony. That's how I framed it. That's how I allowed it. And slowly, something shifted. Not in my actions. In my attention. I started looking forward to those moments. Those small interactions. Those conversations that felt lighter than the silence I was avoiding at home. And that's when the lines started to blur. Not clearly. Not obviously. But enough. Enough that something had already changed. Before anything actually happened. That's the part people don't understand. It doesn't start with the mistake. It starts with the permission. The moment you allow something to feel more important than it should. The moment you stop being fully present where you are. And start investing your attention somewhere else. That's where I was. Right before everything crossed the line. Right before the moment that would change everything. And the worst part is, I knew it. I just didn't stop. The line doesn't appear all at once. It fades in. Slowly. So slowly you can convince yourself it's not there. That's what I did. With Rachel, nothing felt wrong at first. That's the dangerous part. There was no moment where I thought, this is a mistake. There was no clear shift from normal to inappropriate. Just progression. We started timing things without admitting it. Coffee breaks that somehow overlapped. Elevator rides that lasted just a little longer. Conversations that moved beyond small talk. But not far enough to feel like crossing a line. At least not at first. "How's your week?" she asked one morning. "Busy," I said. "Feels like I'm just trying to keep up." She smiled. "Same. I feel like I'm living on autopilot lately." That word, autopilot, it hit something in me. Because that's exactly what my life felt like. Not broken. Just automatic. Predictable. Managed. "Yeah," I said. "That sounds familiar." And just like that, we had something in common. Not dramatic. Not deep. But real enough to feel like connection. That's how it starts. Not with attraction. With understanding. With someone reflecting something back to you that you haven't said out loud. We started talking more. Still casual. Still safe. General frustrations. Nothing you couldn't justify. Nothing you couldn't explain. And that's what made it so easy to continue. Because there was always a reason. Always a way to frame it as harmless. She's just someone I talk to. That's all. That's what I told myself. And for a while, I believed it. But something was changing. Not outside. Inside me. Because I started thinking about those conversations when they weren't happening. Looking forward to them. Noticing when they didn't happen. And that's when you know something has shifted. When your attention starts moving somewhere else. Without your permission. At home. Nothing looked different. Lauren still moved through our life the same way. Still kind. Still present. Still steady. But now, the silence felt louder. Because I had something to compare it to. That's the part people don't talk about. You don't notice what's missing. Until you feel it somewhere else. And once you do, you can't unfeel it. One night, Lauren was talking to me about something. I don't even remember what. Something about the kids. Schedules. Important things. Real things. And I nodded. Said the right things. Responded when I needed to. But my mind was somewhere else. And I caught myself. In the middle of it. Physically present. Emotionally absent. And for a second, something hit me. "What are you doing?" That question came fast. But instead of answering it, I ignored it. That was the moment. Not when something happened. When I chose not to stop it. Because that's how this works. You don't fall into it. You allow it. Piece by piece. Moment by moment. Until it becomes something real. Rachel and I started texting. Not constantly. Not obviously. Just occasionally. "Did you survive today?" "Barely." Same. Harmless. Simple. And every message felt justified. Because there was nothing explicit. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing you could point to and say, "That's wrong." But the truth is, it wasn't about the messages. It was about what they meant. About where my attention was going. About what I was investing in. Because every time I chose to engage with her, I was choosing not to engage somewhere else. And that's where the damage starts. Quietly. Unnoticed. Until it's too late. The tension built slowly. Inside me. Because part of me knew this wasn't just harmless. Knew this wasn't just casual. Knew this was becoming something I wouldn't be able to control later. But the other part, the louder part, kept justifying it. It's nothing that you're not doing anything wrong, that it's just conversation. That's how people cross lines. Not with intention. With permission. And I gave myself permission. Over and over again. Until one day, the situation changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. It was late. Later than usual. I had stayed at the office longer than I needed to. Not for work. Just avoiding going home. That's the truth. Rachel was still there. We ran into each other in the hallway. Empty building. Quiet. Different energy. Still here? She asked. Yeah. You. Same. A small smile. You want to grab a drink? That was the moment. The real one. Not the build-up. Not the slow shift. The decision. Because this time, there was no pretending. No ambiguity. No harmless explanation. This was a choice. Simple. And I felt it. Immediately. That same voice again. Don't do this. But instead of listening, I paused. Just long enough to justify it. It's just a drink. That's what I told myself. It doesn't mean anything. That's what I chose to believe. And that's when everything crossed the line. Not at the bar. Not later. Right there. In that moment. When I said yes. And the worst part is, I knew it. I just didn't stop. There are moments in life that don't feel like turning points when they happen, not because they aren't important, but because they unfold so quietly, so naturally, that you can still pretend you're in control even while everything is already shifting beneath you. That night, when I said yes to that drink, felt like one of those moments. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just easy. Too easy. We walked out of the building together, side by side, neither of us saying much at first, the kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward but instead feels like something unspoken is already understood, like we had both crossed into a different version of the same situation without needing to acknowledge it out loud. The air outside was cool, quiet, the city already starting to slow down, and for a brief second, I remember thinking how normal everything felt, how ordinary the moment looked from the outside, and how completely that masked what was actually happening underneath. We found a small bar not far from the office. Nothing special. Dim lighting. Low music. A place where conversations feel private even when they're not. We sat across from each other. Ordered drinks. And for a while, we talked like we always did. Just the same rhythm. The same tone. The same easy back and forth that had drawn me in from the beginning. But something was different. Not in what we said, in how it felt. Because now there was space. Tension. No interruptions. No boundaries defined by environment. Just presence. And when you put two people in that kind of space, after weeks of gradually shifting attention toward each other, something changes, whether you acknowledge it or not. I remember looking at her at one point, really looking in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before, and noticing details I had ignored until then, the way she held eye contact a second longer than necessary, the way she listened without rushing to respond, the way she seemed completely present in the moment in a way that made everything else feel distant. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not love. Not even attraction, at least not in the way people usually define it. Something quieter. More dangerous. I felt understood. Not deeply. Not meaningfully. But enough to create contrast. And contrast is what changes everything. Because it makes you aware of what you've been missing. And once you feel that, even slightly, it becomes harder to ignore. We stayed longer than we planned. Or maybe we didn't plan at all. That's what it felt like. Time moving without structure. Without intention. Without the usual awareness of where you should be or what you should be doing. And slowly, the conversation shifted. Not dramatically. Just subtly. We started talking about things we hadn't before. Not personal in a way that crossed a clear line. But personal enough. How long have you been married? she asked. 13 years, I said. That's a long time. Yeah. Are you happy? That question. It landed differently than I expected. Not because it was inappropriate, because it was direct. And I realized, in that moment, how long it had been since anyone had asked me that without context, without expectation, without it being part of a larger conversation. I hesitated. Just for a second. And that hesitation, that was the truth. It's good, I said finally. She nodded. But didn't push. Didn't question. Just accepted it. And somehow, that made it easier to stay there. Easier to continue. Easier to not think too deeply about what was happening. Because nothing had been said. Nothing had been defined. Nothing had crossed a clear boundary. But something had already shifted. Inside me. Because I was aware now. Aware of how I felt in that moment. Aware of how different it felt from what I had been experiencing at home. And aware, even if I didn't fully admit it, that I didn't want the moment to end. That's when it becomes dangerous. Not when something obvious happens. When you start wanting something to continue that you know shouldn't. We left the bar later than we should have. Walked back outside into the quiet night. And for a moment, we just stood there. Not moving. Not speaking. Just present. And I could feel it. That tension. That space between what had happened and what could happen next. That's the edge. The moment where everything is still technically intact. Where nothing irreversible has happened yet. But where the direction is already clear. She looked at me. Not directly. But enough. And I felt it again. That same internal voice. Stronger this time. So, go home. Don't take this any further. And for a second, I almost listened. I almost stepped back. Almost chose differently. But instead, I stayed. Just long enough to let the moment continue. And that's the part that still haunts me. Not what happened next. But that moment. That small window. Where I knew exactly what I was doing. And still didn't stop. Because everything that came after was already decided right there. In that hesitation. In that silence. In that choice. And once you cross that line, even if nothing physical has happened yet, you've already left something behind. Something important. Something real. And you don't fully understand that until it's too late. There are moments that don't feel like mistakes when they happen, not because they aren't, but because they unfold with a kind of quiet inevitability that makes you feel like you're simply continuing something that has already begun rather than choosing something new. That's what it felt like. Not like a decision. Like a continuation. We stood there outside the bar, neither of us moving right away, the night stretching around us in that strange, suspended way where time feels slower, heavier, as if it's waiting to see what you're going to do next. And in that silence, I could feel the weight of what had already shifted, even though nothing had technically happened yet. I should probably go, she said softly. Not firmly. Not with distance. Just enough to acknowledge the moment without closing it. Yeah, I said. But neither of us moved. And that's the thing people don't understand. The moment doesn't force you. It gives you space. And what you do with that space, that's where everything changes. She looked at me again, just briefly, and there was something in that look that wasn't dramatic or obvious or even clearly defined, but it was enough to remove any remaining ambiguity about what this was becoming, about where it was going, about what would happen if neither of us stepped away. And I didn't. Not because I didn't know better. Because I chose not to act on what I knew. That's the truth I've had to live with ever since. We walked back toward the building slowly, not saying much, the silence between us no longer neutral but filled with something unspoken, something that didn't need language because it had already moved past that stage, and when we reached the entrance, everything felt closer somehow, more contained, like the world had narrowed down to just that moment. Inside, the building was almost empty. Lights dimmed. Hallways quiet. The kind of space where everything feels slightly removed from reality, where consequences feel distant, where it becomes easier to pretend that what you're doing exists in isolation from the rest of your life. We stopped near the elevators. Another pause. Another moment. Another chance to step back. And I felt it again, stronger now, sharper, clearer. This is where you stop. This is where you choose your life. But instead of stepping away, I stayed. Just long enough. That's all it takes. Not a dramatic choice. Just a small extension of the moment. A few seconds longer than you should. And everything shifts. The details of what happened next don't matter as much as people think they do. Because the truth is, the moment wasn't defined by action. It was defined by intention. By the fact that I allowed something to happen that I knew shouldn't. By the fact that I crossed a line that had already been blurred long before that night. And the worst part, the part that still stays with me, is that there was no confusion. No uncertainty. No misunderstanding. I knew. The entire time. And I still didn't stop. Afterward, everything felt quiet again. Too quiet. Not peaceful. Empty. Like something had been taken out of the moment, leaving behind a space that didn't quite make sense. We didn't say much. There wasn't anything to say. Because there are no words that can undo something that has already happened, no explanation that can make it less real, no justification that can remove the awareness of what you've just done. I should go, she said again. This time, it sounded different. More distant. More final. Yeah, I said. And this time, we move. We walked away from each other without looking back, and I remember thinking as I stepped outside into the cold night air, how normal everything looked, how unchanged the world seemed, how nothing in the environment reflected what had just shifted inside me. And that's what makes it so disorienting. Because the world doesn't react. It doesn't mark the moment. It doesn't signal that something important has just happened. It just continues. And you're left carrying it. Alone. I drove home in silence. No music. No distractions. Just my thoughts. Louder than anything else. And for the first time since this started, I felt it. Not excitement. Not curiosity. Not even confusion. Guilt. Immediate. Unavoidable. Because now, there was no ambiguity. No gray area. No way to pretend this was harmless. I had crossed the line. Fully. And I knew exactly what that meant. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did. Lights on. Familiar. The place where my real life existed. And for a moment, I just sat there. Hands on the steering wheel. Breathing. Trying to understand how something could change so completely in such a short amount of time. Trying to understand how I could walk into that house and act like nothing had happened. Because that's what people do. They return. They continue. They pretend. Not because they don't care. Because they don't know how to face what they've done. I walked inside quietly. Lauren was in the living room. Sitting on the couch. Reading. She looked up when I came in. Hey, she said. Just like always. Hey. And in that moment, everything broke. Not outside. Inside me. Because she looked exactly the same. Trusting. And I knew something she didn't. Something that had already changed everything. Something I couldn't take back. How was your night? She asked. Simple question. Normal. Routine. And I answered it. Fine. That word. Fine. And that's when I realized something. The moment I walked into that house and said that word, I wasn't just someone who made a mistake. I became someone who could live with it. Someone who could carry it. Someone who could look at the person I loved and not tell the truth. And that was the part that hurt the most. Not what I did. What I became because of it. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The betrayal doesn't start with the act. It starts with the silence after. With the choice to hide it. To carry it alone. To pretend it doesn't exist. And once you make that choice, you're no longer just dealing with what happened. You're living inside it. Every day. And it doesn't leave. Not really. It stays. Quiet. Constant. Waiting. Until you finally face it, or it destroys something else. The worst part about guilt isn't the moment you feel it. It's how it stays. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just constant. Like a quiet pressure that never fully disappears, no matter how normal everything around you tries to feel. That's what my life became after that night. Not chaos. Not immediate consequences. Just continuation. And that's what made it unbearable. Because everything looked the same. Lauren still made coffee in the morning, standing by the counter in that familiar way, one hand wrapped around the mug, the other absent-mindedly scrolling through something on her phone, occasionally glancing up to ask me small, practical questions that required simple answers and nothing more. "How's your schedule today? Do you need me to pick anything up? Are you going to be late?" And I answered, like I always had, like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Because every word I said now carried weight. Every normal interaction felt distorted by what I knew and she didn't. And the hardest part wasn't pretending. It was realizing how easy it was to do it. That terrified me more than anything else. Because it meant I was capable of living a double version of my life. The one that existed externally, and the one that existed only in my head. And those two versions never touched. Not unless I let them. That's where the real tension began. Not between me and Lauren. Inside me. Because I couldn't escape it. I tried. At first. I told myself it was a one-time thing. A mistake. Something that didn't define me. Something I could move past. Something I could bury. That's what I wanted to believe. But the truth doesn't work like that. It doesn't disappear just because you decide not to look at it. It stays. In the quiet moments. In the spaces between conversations. In the way your mind drifts when everything else is still. I started noticing it at night. That's when it was the loudest. When the house was quiet. When Lauren was asleep beside me. And I was left alone with my thoughts. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Not just what happened. The moment before. The hesitation. The choice. Because that's the part one couldn't escape. Not the act itself. The awareness. The fact that I knew. And still didn't stop. That's what stayed with me. That's what made it impossible to move on. And slowly, something started changing. Not in my actions. In how I experienced everything. I started looking at Lauren differently. Not because she had changed. Because I had. Because now, there was distance. Not from her. From myself. From the version of me she believed she was with. And that created something I didn't expect. Shame. Persistent. Unavoidable. Because every time she smiled at me, every time she trusted me, every time she treated me like nothing had changed, I felt it. That disconnect. Between who I was and who she thought I was. And that's when the realization hit. This wasn't something I could carry forever. Not because it would be discovered. Because it was changing me. Quietly. Slowly. But permanently. I became more distant. Not intentionally. But inevitably. Because it's hard to be fully present with someone when you're hiding something from them. It's hard to connect when part of you is constantly managing a truth you're not sharing. And Lauren noticed. Not directly. Not immediately. But gradually. "You've been quiet lately," she said one night. We were sitting on the couch. The same place. The same routine. But now, everything felt different. "Just tired," I said. That word again. Tired. It's amazing how often people use that word to cover something deeper. She nodded. But I could see it. The slight shift in her expression. The awareness. The beginning of something. And that's when I realized something else. This wouldn't stay contained. It would spread. Into the relationship. Into the way we interacted. Into everything. Because you can't hide something like that without it affecting how you show up. That's the part people don't understand. It's not just about the act. It's about what it does to you afterward. And what it does to everything around you. Days passed. Then weeks. And the weight didn't get lighter. It got heavier. Because every day I chose not to say anything was another layer. Another distance. Another version of myself I had to maintain. And eventually, I couldn't do it anymore. Not because I was strong. Because I was exhausted. From pretending. From carrying it. From being two different people at the same time. The moment came quietly. Like everything else. We were in the kitchen. Lauren was making dinner. Talking about something simple. Something normal. And I realized I wasn't listening. Not really. Because my mind was somewhere else. And I stopped. Just stopped. Mid-thought. Mid-moment. And I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in weeks, I saw her clearly. Not through guilt. Not through distance. And something broke. Inside me. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But completely. I need to tell you something, I said. My voice didn't shake. But it felt different. Heavy. Final. She turned to me. Concern in her eyes. What's wrong? And for a second, everything paused. Because this was it. The moment. The one I had been avoiding. The one that would change everything. And I realized something in that instant. This wasn't about saving the relationship. Or destroying it. It was about truth. About finally aligning the two versions of my life into one. No matter what it cost. I messed up, I said. Simple. Direct. No explanation. Not yet. But enough. Because some truths don't need detail to be understood. Her expression changed. Not fully. Not immediately. But enough. What do you mean? She asked. And I took a breath. The kind that feels like stepping off something you can't climb back onto. And I said it. Not perfectly. Not eloquently. But honestly. And in that moment, everything changed. Not just because of what I did. Because I finally stopped hiding it. And that's the lesson. Not about cheating. Not about mistakes. About truth. Because if you're watching this, and you think the worst part is what you do, it's not. It's what you choose to carry afterward. It's the silence. The distance. The version of yourself you become when you stop being honest. And the truth is, you can survive the mistake. But you can't survive pretending it didn't happen. Because eventually, it changes you. And when it does, you lose something even more important than the relationship. You lose yourself.